There are a lot of strong Pokemon in Pokemon TCG Pocket, and Skiddo is not one of them. Every time Skiddo attacks, you have to flip a coin, and if you flip tails, the attack does nothing. If you flip heads, Skiddo does 40 damage, but that doesn't mean much when there are Pokemon with HP more than 3 times that. And when most of the popular decks are doing lots of damage every turn, it's really hard for Skiddo to keep up. If you want to win, there isn't really a good reason to use Skiddo. But Skiddo is one of my favorite Pokemon. I beat Pokemon Y without evolving my Skiddo, and I have every Skiddo plush ever released. All one of them. So even if it's almost impossible to win with the Skiddo deck, that won't stop me from finding a way to make it work. Realistically, Skiddo isn't going to be doing enough damage by itself to take every KO. And since we can't even guarantee that Skiddo will do any damage, we'll be lucky to get even just one KO. So if he can at least get the winning KO, I would consider that a win for Skiddo. The perfect partner then would be a Pokemon that can 1. Trap our opponent in the active, and 2. Do enough damage for Skiddo to deal the final blow. Luckily, Vileplume can do both of those. With Vileplume's attack, we can chip away at our opponent's HP and put them to sleep so they can't retreat, meaning they can't run from Skiddo's devastating 40 damage. Since Skiddo and Vileplume are both grass types, I built my deck to have more grass support, with cards like Caterpie to find our grass Pokemon, and Erica to heal lots of damage. Now that I had a solid deck list, it was time to try it out, but I quickly realized that this was going to be a lot harder than I first thought. Flipping heads with Skiddo's attack wasn't the only thing that I had to be lucky with. Vileplume is a stage 2 Pokemon, so I would have to get lucky with my draws to find all the evolutions in time. And even when I finally fully evolved, I would also have to hope that my opponent wouldn't wake up from sleep. When a Pokemon is asleep in Pokemon Pocket, between every turn they flip a coin, and if they flip heads, they can wake up immediately. Since we need Vileplume to attack a few times to prepare for Skiddo, it's a problem if my opponent wakes up immediately and KOs my only threat on board. It also didn't help that it felt like every time I attacked with Skiddo, I would keep flipping tails after tails after tails. But I knew that if I kept trying, eventually everything would line up perfectly for Skiddo to win a game. And after many battles, I finally had a perfect run. I somehow took the first 2 points with Skiddo, meaning all I had to do was take one more KO to win the game. I set up my Vileplume, I did enough damage, and my opponent's Pokemon didn't wake up from sleep. There was nothing my opponent could do to protect their Pokemon, and all I had to do was retreat into my Skiddo. Except there was one way they could escape. They conceded. Skiddo never got a chance to flip the coin. I couldn't even consider that a win because Skiddo could have flipped tails. And for a while, every time I set everything up perfectly for Skiddo to win, my opponents would always concede before I could attack. This was starting to feel almost impossible. I was getting so close, but never getting the chance to prove that Skiddo could do it. But I knew that if I could get lucky with everything else up to this point, I could eventually get lucky with an opponent that doesn't concede. And my patience paid off. I reached another perfect setup and braced for my opponent to concede, but this time they finally gave me a chance. This was it. This was the moment that Skiddo and I had worked so hard for. I retreated into Skiddo and started the attack. All I needed was to flip heads and... oh, that's tails. Skiddo had come so close to winning, but in the final moments, we lost the coin flip. And for 2 more games, I would attack with Skiddo to finish the battle, but flip tails both times. I needed lots of luck to even get to the final moment, but my luck seemed to keep failing right at the finish line. But I couldn't give up on Skiddo. Not after how far we've already come. I kept battling and battling, waiting for the perfect game. Until this happened. I was going up against a fire deck, which was probably one of the worst matchups to run into. All of their fire types would do extra damage to my grass Pokemon, giving me less time to set everything up. But my first turn went basically perfectly. I started with an Oddish in the active, I had a Gloom in my hand ready to evolve next turn, and I drew into the Vileplume and Skiddo with Professor Oak. I had all the pieces in front of me, I just needed time. My opponent was less lucky, and they quickly passed to me after not finding any more Pokemon to bench. All I had to do was evolve into Vileplume turn by turn. Once I evolved and had enough energy on Vileplume to attack, I could finally start pressuring their Pokemon. They flipped tails on the sleep flip, leaving the Moltres stuck in the active for my Vileplume to KO the next turn. But while I was dealing with the Moltres, my opponent was preparing a Charizard EX. With 180 HP, the Charizard was going to be tough to deal with. I didn't think I could KO the Charizard, so I used Sabrina to target their second Moltres instead. Maybe you can guess what we're doing here. We're attacking with Vileplume again. But the Moltres didn't stay asleep this time. They retreated back into the Charizard, and it looked like I would have to overcome the Charizard after all. I needed the Charizard to stay asleep to have any chance of knocking it out, and fortunately it did. My opponent used the potion to heal a bit of damage, but after another Vileplume attack, the Charizard was in the perfect range for Skiddo to deal with. When their Charizard woke up from this next sleep, it should have been over. They could easily retreat into one of their healthy bench Pokemon, preventing me from taking a knockout. Except, by some miracle, they didn't. They attacked with Charizard and left it in the active, ready to be knocked out. And by some other miracle, they didn't concede either. It was finally Skiddo's time to shine. We had flipped tails so many times before, and we could still flip tails here, but this was a new chance. The 50-50 chance to decide it all. After 86 games, Skiddo finally won. It was a really long journey, but I've learned that it's always possible to win with your favorite Pokemon. All you have to do is believe hard enough. And maybe flip a coin hundreds of times. Thanks for watching.